Okie dokie. In my previous video I showed you how to navigate through directories in a Linux file system. This video is also going to be a very basic function, and in a nutshell it's just how we take a peek at the contents of a text data file and how we make very basic edits to it. Again, basic stuff, but it's a wee bit complicated doing it in a command terminal if you've never done it before. And if you work in the scientific industry, then you're going to have to do this kind of thing. So it's worth getting the basics down straight away. So just a bit of groundwork. In Blue Peter fashion, I've already created some text files for us to look at. So if I run my list command in this directory, the file we're going to be using today is one I've created called temperature.log. It's a text data file, and it's more accurately, it's a comma separated value file, CSV. Basically, it's a spreadsheet with two columns. The first column is a timestamp, and the second column is a CPU temperature on the server, and it's been measured every 15 minutes for many days. Just a little bit of a side note before we begin. These file extensions, in this case .log, they don't really mean as much in the Linux system, and definitely not when using a command terminal as you might expect if you're coming from a Windows background. So in some operating systems, if you change the file extension, so I change this from .log to .txt, it'll change how the file opens, and it'll change how it's treated. That's not the case here, as you come to see. So the fact that it's got .log in the end is something I've done. And .log is just a custom extension that I put onto any file that comes out of a script that I've created if what's being recorded there is a log of a time series, for example. Basically what I'm saying is don't worry about the extensions, it doesn't matter. What we're looking at here is a CSV file. Now, normally I'd be able to just double click on this and show you what's in there, but that's kind of the root of the problem. If I'm just inside a command terminal, I don't have a graphical user interface, and I don't have a fancy graphical text editor like Notepad or Word. First time Notepad's ever been called fancy. I just don't have those things to open and show you a file, so how in the hell do you do it if all you have is a keyboard and a black and white screen? Well, there's a few ways of going about it, and the first one I want to illustrate is a very simple function called head. Head. So if I type head and then temperature.log, the default behavior of head, if I don't give it any arguments, just the file, it will spit out the first 10 lines of data in that file. So this is actually pretty useful in itself. Usually we just punch in head if what you're trying to do is look at what's in the file, see if it's got a header row, for instance, get an idea of what's in each column, and more importantly, see if each column and row is laid out in a consistent pattern or if it's all over the place, all higgledy-piggledy. So as I said, it's very simple but quite useful. Like everything in Linux, it's also quite customizable. So if I look at some options that are available by typing head --help, this will bring up the help menu for the head function, and you can see there are these sort of arguments that you can use to modify how head behaves. And the one I want to highlight is this one, -n. So if I just clear a window, and I use liberal use of the up and down keys to go back to this command I put in earlier. But this time I add this argument, so -n and then 3. You'll see how this has changed the default behavior. Instead of the default behavior of just printing out 10 lines, it now prints out the top 3. Okay, so that's cool if you want to look at the top of the file. But this file is a time series. It's effectively a sensor reading taken every 15 minutes. And quite often the time series, what you want to do is just log in and see the last few entries from your sensor, see what the current state of affairs is. So to do that, we'd use the twin of head, and it's called tail. Tail temperature.log. So tail, without any arguments, does the opposite of head. It prints out the last 10 lines of data. So you can see the last recording of temperature was at 1915, which is just a couple of minutes ago, 45 degrees. So that's the most recent recording. And just like head, this one also accepts the n argument, so I can limit it to, like, for example, just the last 3 lines or the last 203 lines, if that's my inclination. So also simple so far. It's head to view the top lines and tail to view the bottom lines. Has to be said though, in real life, you're not just going to want to look at the top few and the bottom few lines. Sometimes you just want to read your damn file. So, a couple of ways of doing that. I'm going to do the slightly clunky one first, and then the slightly better one next. So, the first one is a stupidly named command, which is cat. Cat is actually short for concatenate. So, to elaborate on this behavior, if I were to put cat and then one file and then another file's name, it would join the two together and print them out as a oneer. So that's kind of where it gets its name from. But if I'm honest, cat's more often used just to spit out the contents of a file. So by way of demonstration, if I type cat and then temperature.log, what it'll do is just vomit up the entire contents of that file into the command window. And I can use my mouse scroll wheel, if you have one, to roll back and forth through the data. This does have a couple of issues with it though, and the most prominent one is that I'm using PuTTY in this case to connect to my server, and there's a maximum number of lines in the history that can be shown. So for a very large file, you can see as has happened here, it's rolled past the end of the window and it can only go back so far. So that's not a lot of use for a very big file. So there's another option, and that's to use an even stupider named file program called less. So less is what's called a pager program. So a pager takes all the data in a file and then presents it one page at a time, and then you use the arrow keys to move up and down through the text. So just a page up and down in it. The reason it's called less is that the original program that's based on was called more, the idea being that you pushed a key to see more of the data. At some point someone made a wee bit of a change, an update to more, resulting in a new program which they called less because less is more. You know what, it's honestly it's just easier if you assume that everything in Linux has a stupid name because it's been built by an army of nerds with a sense of humor based on Monty Python. Okay, it's just going to be easier if you accept that going forward. Anyway, here's less in action. Less temperature.log, enter. So what's actually happened is I've opened a program inside the command terminal. You can see that I don't have my little string anymore to my little command prompt. If I use the up and down keys, you can see I'm currently at the start of the data. You can see that from the timestamp, but I can roll back and forward just by pushing the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard. If I want to quit out of less and go back to my command prompt, I just hit the Q key, Q for Queen. And there we are. I'm back in my command prompt. So, a bit of a recap. It's head if you want to view the top of a file. It's tail if you want to view the bottom. It's cat if you just want to, glurge up the entire file into the command window at once. And less if you want to page up and down through it. So that's 4 different ways of viewing the data. I've not shown you any ways of making edits to it. And this, unfortunately, is where I need to make a wee bit of a distinction for you. So, if you're going to go on to do great things in Linux in your life, if you're going to do very complicated things like writing code inside a terminal window, if you're going to edit extremely large text files or huge configuration files, eventually you're going to need to learn one of 2 text editors, most likely. So there's one called Vim, for V improved, Vim, another one called Emacs. Now, these are extremely powerful. They've got thousands of functions built into them. Emacs has been described as an operating system in itself. It's that kind of level of complexity. So they've got a huge amount of potential for doing stuff to text, only using a command line. What they are not is easy. It takes an awful lot of time investment and an awful lot of will and effort to get really good at using Vim and Emacs, and it takes a little bit longer to get comfortable using Vim or Emacs. So I'm not putting you off. I'm just sort of making you aware that there are these very powerful editors and you can go on to use them, but don't take them lightly. Thankfully, for normal people like you and I, we can use a much friendlier cousin called Nano. Nano is just my favorite. So within Linux circles, people sometimes laugh at people that use Nano because it's seen as basic, it's seen as newbies stuff. But we're newbies, and I don't care. So let's open up Nano. We do this just by typing nano, then our file name, and what we get is a very, very basic text editor. So my up and down keys, as you might expect, move me up and down and left and right through the text. My keyboard, shockingly, works as a keyboard. So I can make my edits like that. Down at the bottom of the screen, there's also a little context menu, which takes a bit of interpretation, which I'll go through just now. So you can see the text labels here sort of refer to things that you might expect from a normal text editor, so justifying text, cutting it, pasting it, finding stuff and jumping to lines. Next to those labels are usually a symbol and a letter. So if it's got a wee hat symbol and then a letter, in order to perform this function, so in this case get help, what it wants me to do is type hold the control key and then hit a letter, in this case G. So to open the help function is control G. There we are. You'll see I'm now in the help function, and my context menu is also changed to now show me the options I have available here. To get out of this one, again, it would be a little hat symbol, so it's control X to close, and we're back at our editor. So that covers the majority of them. Just one that's worth highlighting is this control _. So if I have, for example, if I'm working on a Python code and someone's told me at line 26 there's some code I need to work on, if I hit control _ and then type the code I want to jump to, the line I want to jump to, it'll teleport me directly to that line. So it's a good way of jumping back and forth through a big file when you know the structure. Okie dokie. So that's the majority of them. I've got this little hat, which means press control at the same time as a key. But you also see the ones I've got M. In this case, what it wants is the Alt key. So, for example, down here, undo is Alt and the letter U. So if I do Alt U, you can see there's the gibberish I typed in earlier, which I actually don't want. But it was just to highlight that the M in this case means Alt, and the hat, as I said earlier, means Control. When I've done editing, I can just do Control and X to exit, and this will ask me a wee pop-up menu saying, do you want to save the modified buffer? Basically what it's saying is, I've not done anything to the original file yet, all the changes you've made so far have been in a buffer, do you want me to overwrite the existing file with the changes you've made? So it's the Y key for yes, the N key for no, and Control C to cancel out and go back to editing. In my case I want to do N because I don't want to screw up the file that I've prepared already, so just no. Okay, and I'm back to my command prompt. So that's really all I have for you in this video. Like I say, I just want to impress on you these functions, head and tail to view top and bottom, less to page through a file, cat just to view the entire file in a oneer, and if, like me, you're a beginner and you don't particularly care about all the dogma of Linux and you just want to do your job with a minimum of effort, Nano is a brilliant text editor for beginners. So that's it. Take it easy until the next time.